Welcome back to the Podcast Playground. Our newest podcast is The Best Podcast.
Join Jay Carter and Mivita Best on The Best Podcast, where the dynamic duo brings you their insider secrets to everything wonderful.
Known for their discerning taste, the Best family has critiqued the finest in entertainment, technology, and lifestyle.
Now Jay and me dive deep into the top 5 everything, from the latest cell phones to affordable wines that won't break the bank.
Every episode promises engaging discussions filled with humor and insight, ensuring you discover what truly deserves a spot at the top.
Whether you're looking for the best gadgets or simply want to elevate your everyday choices, this podcast is your go-to guide.
So tell a friend, you've found the best podcast,
where every recommendation is a gem waiting to be uncovered. Tune in weekly for your dose of excellence.
Welcome back, everyone, and I'm excited because today we're talking about something that I think is particularly relevant to all of you who, like us, get so much of your news and info from podcasts. We're talking about the world's most valuable brands. Now, instead of just looking at one ranking, we're actually going to compare 3 different reports.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of data. I'm excited to see what kind of insights emerge when we compare these different perspectives.
Me too. I think it'll be really interesting to see what they agree on, where they might differ, and what the overall trends tell us about, the state of the brand world today.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, just maybe, we can get a glimpse of what the future holds for these brands. So why don't we jump right in with Interbrand? They've been tracking brands for a quarter of a century now. That's got to be some of the most comprehensive data out there.
It really is. It gives us a unique historical perspective on how brand value has evolved over time. And let me tell you, the changes have been dramatic.
I bet. I was reading that only 35 brands have managed to stay on Interbrand's list for the entire 25 years.
It's true. And even more striking is that only just two brands have remained in the top 10 throughout that entire period.
Wait, seriously? Only 2? Okay, now I'm really curious. Which ones are they?
Well, I think you'll recognize these names, Microsoft and Coca-Cola.
Wow, Coca-Cola. That's kind of surprising. But I guess when you think about it, they've been around forever. They're like this global icon, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. They've managed to stay relevant and adapt to changing consumer tastes over decades. That's no easy feat.
It makes you wonder, what happened to all those brands that dropped off the list? Like, what were some of the biggest factors that led to their decline?
Well, it's hard to pinpoint one specific reason, but I think in many cases it comes down to a failure to adapt and innovate. The world's changing at an incredibly fast pace. Consumer expectations are shifting constantly. Brands that can't keep up, that cling to outdated models, they're the ones that risk fading into obscurity.
Like the survival of the fittest, but for brands. So what about the brands that are thriving today? Let's talk about the top dogs, the current leaders in brand value. According to Interbrand, Apple is still holding on to that coveted #1 spot, even though their brand value dipped slightly this year.
Yeah, Apple's resilience is pretty amazing. They've been at the top for a while now, and even with a slight decline, they're still ahead of the pack by a significant margin.
They've really built a loyal following, haven't they? People just seem to love their products and their whole ecosystem.
It's true. They've managed to create a brand that people feel emotionally connected to.
So who's breathing down Apple's neck? Who else is in the top 5?
Well, it's no surprise to see that the tech giants are still dominating. We've got Microsoft at number 2, Amazon at number 3, and Google holding strong at number 4.
It seems like technology is the key to success these days.
It's certainly a major factor. These brands have become such integral parts of our lives. We rely on them for communication, entertainment, shopping, information, you name it.
They've basically become indispensable. And
Yeah.
rounding out the top 5 is Samsung.
Another tech powerhouse. It's clear that technology is driving a lot of the brand value growth we're seeing.
Okay, so tech is clearly a dominant force. But were there any surprises further down Interbrand's list? Any brands that made significant jumps or, conversely, took a tumble?
Well, one notable decline was Tesla.
Oh, really? Tesla. I would have thought with the whole electric car revolution and, Elon Musk being, Elon Musk, that their brand value would be skyrocketing.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it seems like they've hit a bit of a snag. It could be due to increased competition in the electric vehicle market, or maybe some of the controversies surrounding the company and its CEO have had an impact.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about any success stories? Any brands that saw their value soar this year?
Definitely. Instagram had a really impressive year. Their brand value went up significantly.
Makes sense. Everyone's obsessed with visual storytelling these days.
Mhm.
But it's also kind of reassuring to see that some of those classic legacy brands are still holding strong.
Oh, absolutely. Coca-Cola, as we mentioned, is still in the top 10. And then you've got brands like McDonald's, Disney, Toyota. They're all proving that they have staying power.
They've really stood the test of time. Any newcomers to the top 100? Any brands that are making their debut this year?
There is one. Pandora made it onto the list for the first time.
Pandora, the jewelry company.
That's the one.
Huh. Interesting. I guess people are still drawn to the idea of personalized jewelry, even in a world that's increasingly digital.
It seems so. There's something about those tangible objects, those little charms and bracelets that hold sentimental value that still resonates with people.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good sense of how Interbrand sees the brand landscape. But now I'm curious to see how Brand Finance's Global 500 compares.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if their rankings align with Interbrands or if they have a completely different take on things.
And from what I've read, Brand Finance uses a slightly different approach to assess brand value.
They do. And it can lead to some pretty interesting surprises.
Okay, well, let's dive into that in just a moment. But first, we got to take a quick break. Okay, so we're back and ready to dig into Brand Finance's Global 500. Now, you mentioned that Brand Finance has a slightly different way of evaluating brands, right?
Yeah, their methodology is pretty unique. One of the key things they focus on is something called the Brand Strength Index.
Brand Strength Index. Okay, that sounds kind of technical.
It is, but it's also super interesting. Basically, they look at a bunch of factors that contribute to a brand's overall strength. Things like marketing investment, stakeholder equity, business performance, all that good stuff.
So it's not just about how much money a brand is making.
Exactly. It's more about the intangible assets. You know, things like reputation, customer loyalty, brand awareness.
Gotcha. So a brand with a really strong reputation and a loyal customer base could actually have a higher brand value according to Brand Finance, even if they're not necessarily the most profitable brand out there.
Precisely. It recognizes that those intangible assets are incredibly valuable and can really drive long-term success.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like saying a brand with a devoted following has a built-in advantage. Okay, so Brand Finance takes this holistic approach. But before we get into their specific rankings, I'm curious, what are some of the key differences we might expect to see between Brand Finance's list and Interbrand's list?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that Brand Finance's methodology can sometimes favor brands with strong heritage and legacy. So you might see some luxury brands or well-established consumer goods companies ranking higher on Brand Finance's list compared to Interbrand.
That's interesting. So it's not just about being the shiniest, newest tech company on the block?
Nope. Brand Finance recognizes that there's value in history, in tradition, in craftsmanship.
I like that. It's a good reminder that brand value isn't just about, disruption and innovation. It's also about the things that endure, the qualities that stand the test of time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about Interbrand, we talked about Brand Finance. Now it's time to bring in our third perspective, Kantar BrandZ. Now, from what I understand, Kantar BrandZ takes a slightly different approach. They're not just looking at financial data, they're also factoring in consumer sentiment, right?
That's right. They combine financial analysis with consumer insights, which gives us a really interesting and well-rounded view of brand value.
So they're not just looking at, the balance sheet, they're also trying to understand how people feel about these brands.
Exactly. They recognize that ultimately brand value is driven by people. It's about how consumers perceive a brand, how they connect with it emotionally, and how likely they are to choose that brand over its competitors.
So they're tapping into the psychology of brand loyalty.
You could say that.
Yeah.
They want to understand what makes a brand truly resonate with its audience.
Makes sense. So what were some of the key findings from Kantar BrandZ's 2024 report? What stood out to you?
Well, one of the most striking things is that the total value of the top 100 brands increased by a whopping 20% in 2024.
Wow, 20%. That's a huge jump.
It is. It suggests that brands are really bouncing back after a period of, global uncertainty and economic fluctuations.
That's encouraging. It shows that even in a challenging environment, strong brands can not only survive, but thrive.
Exactly. And another really interesting finding is that Apple became the first brand to surpass $1 trillion in value.
$1 trillion. That's insane.
It is. It's a historic milestone, and it just underscores the sheer dominance of Apple in the tech world.
It seems like the tech giants are still the ones to beat.
They definitely have a strong hold on the top spots. But what's interesting is that we're also seeing some new players emerge, particularly in sectors like AI and sustainable technology.
Speaking of AI, NVIDIA had an absolutely massive year. Their brand value increased by like 178%.
I know, right? It's mind-blowing. It just goes to show the incredible growth potential in the AI sector.
It makes you wonder what other companies are going to emerge as leaders in this space.
It's definitely an exciting time to be watching the AI landscape evolve, and I think it's safe to say that AI is going to have a huge impact on brands and how they operate in the future.
It's already starting to change the way brands interact with consumers and how they personalize their offerings.
Absolutely. AI is enabling brands to create more tailored experiences, deliver more relevant content, and ultimately build stronger connections with their audiences.
So we've got the tech giants still holding strong. But we're also seeing the rise of new players in fields like AI. I'm curious, though, did Kantar BrandZ's report highlight any other interesting trends? Any surprises or newcomers to the top 100?
There were definitely some interesting additions. For example, Lululemon, the athletic apparel company, made its debut in the top 100.
Lululemon, huh? I guess athleisure is here to stay.
It seems so. Comfort, style, and wellness are all big trends right now, and Lululemon seems to be tapping into that perfectly.
Any other surprises?
Well, this one might raise a few eyebrows, but Corona, the beer brand, also made it onto the list.
Corona. Really? That's kind of unexpected.
I know, right? But when you think about it, Corona has done a fantastic job of creating a strong brand identity and associating itself with like relaxation, good times, and that kind of aspirational beach lifestyle.
It's like they bottled the feeling of vacation.
Exactly. And that's something that clearly resonates with a lot of people.
So it seems like brand loyalty is evolving. It's not just about sticking with the same brands out of habit anymore. It's about finding brands that align with our values, our lifestyles, and our aspirations.
I think you're spot on. Consumers today are much more discerning. They want brands that reflect their own personal identities.
It makes you wonder if the traditional model of brand building is still relevant.
It's definitely changing. Brands can't just rely on advertising or celebrity endorsements anymore. They need to create authentic connections, foster trust, and engage with consumers on a much deeper level.
It's like they need to have a purpose, a story that people can really connect with.
Exactly. Consumers are looking for brands that stand for something, that have a soul.
It's not just about buying a product anymore. It's about buying into a lifestyle, a belief system.
I think that's a really insightful way to put it.
So we've talked about Interbrand, we've talked about Kantar BrandZ, and now I kind of want to circle back to Brand Finance. We don't really get into their specific rankings.
Yeah, we got a little sidetracked.
We did. But you mentioned earlier that Brand Finance's methodology can sometimes lead to some surprises. So I'm curious, what are some of the key differences we might see in their top 10, let's say, compared to Interbrand or Kantar BrandZ?
Well, remember how Brand Finance places a lot of emphasis on that brand strength index?
Yeah, the whole intangible assets thing.
Right. So that means that brands with a really strong heritage, a loyal customer base, and a solid reputation might actually rank higher on Brand Finance's list, even if their financial performance isn't quite as stellar as some of the tech giants.
Okay, so we might see some luxury brands, maybe some classic consumer goods companies, making a strong showing.
Exactly. Think about brands like Rolex, Louis Vuitton, maybe even Coca-Cola. They might not be growing at the same breakneck speed as, say, a Tesla or an NVIDIA, but they've got that staying power, that enduring appeal.
I'm starting to see how looking at these different rankings side by side can give us a much richer understanding of the brand landscape.
It's like getting different angles on the same picture.
Yeah, it's not just about who's making the most money or who's growing the fastest.
It's about the different factors that contribute to a brand's overall value, both tangible and intangible. It's been great to explore these different perspectives and to see how, despite their different methodologies, these reports ultimately converge on the idea that brands are most valuable when they connect with people on a deep emotional level.
I think that's a great takeaway for all of us, whether we're consumers, entrepreneurs, or just interested observers of the brand world. Brand value isn't just about dollars and cents. It's about the connections we make, the stories we tell, and the values we share. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Think about the brands that you truly love, the brands that you feel a real connection with. What is it about those brands that resonates with you? What makes them special? Because those are the brands that are truly shaping the world we live in, and they're the brands that will continue to thrive in the years to come.